Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. I'm an employment law and business law attorney at the law office of Eric M. Sauber, and I host this weekly show Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. here on Talk Radio NYC, where I have guests when we discuss some of the pressing employment, labor, and business law issues and other issues business related that impact companies and business owners and employers during these challenging times of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in that spirit, tonight, I am very pleased to welcome my guest, Ms. Belinda Di Giambattista. Belinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on. I realized, Belinda, I always ask my guests in advance how to pronounce their last name, and I probably should have asked you that because your name's a little long. I hope I didn't butcher it. If I did, please tell me.
Not too bad. It's Di Giambattista.
Di Giambattista.
There you go. Perfect.
Thank you for correcting that. Yeah, my apologies for not.
No worries.
But to keep things rolling, our guest tonight, as I mentioned, Belinda is the founder and CEO of Choose Your Metric. Belinda brings 20 years of executive experience in business management, food services, and the global financial sector to her position as founder and CEO of Choose Your Metric. Inspired by the business owners that Belinda meets each day, she launched Choose Your Metric in the spring of 2016 in order to provide guidance, education, coaching, and real-world experience to help owners achieve success as they define it. Belinda's experience as a business owner, combined with an equal amount of time in corporate America, make her uniquely qualified to help businesses of any size to make strategic decisions and to focus their resources on their goals. Belinda has built, expanded, and sold her second business, Butter Beans, a 100-plus employee company, for which she made the Inc. 5000 list and positioned herself for a successful sale in 2017. Prior to Butter Beans, Belinda, it's a tongue twister there, worked with small businesses and senior executives and institutional investors at Moody's, BB&T, and BDO Seidman. Some roles that she has had included credit, business development, and product strategy. So with that, again, Belinda, it's really great to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to share with our audience what our topic is and kind of to frame our discussion. And the title of tonight's episode, our show, is Your Abundant Business, a Path Back to Success in the Wake of COVID-19. And what Belinda and I were really discussing is that in this phase of the pandemic, I'm hearing, and perhaps Belinda's hearing, more and more business owners that are focused on thriving, on growth and abundance. We went from the sort of survival mode that just hunkered down to reassessing and deciding that it's time to grow and be strategic about it. So the question becomes, how can you achieve abundance from a marketing, an operations, and a strategic planning perspective from that standpoint? And so tonight, Belinda will share her nuggets of wisdom, her knowledge, and her experience on this topic. So with that, again, Belinda, it's great to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share anything. And if anybody has questions, of course, they can always, chime in on LinkedIn or reach out to you and we can continue the conversation. But this is going to be great.
Absolutely. I think so too. I'm looking forward to it. And so I wanted to ask you about yourself, actually. If you could tell our listeners a bit more about yourself in terms of, I was wondering, what prompted you, Belinda, to transition from an employee at large companies, right, in corporate America,
right,
to a founder and business owner?
Yeah, it's a big decision. And I know a lot of people contemplate it and then maybe dip their toe in and quickly change their mind because it's a ton of work, right? So, I guess I would say I come from a family of entrepreneurial spirits and entrepreneurs. My dad is an entrepreneur. He is a jeweler. He's only ever worked for himself my entire life. I've watched him build his business and run his business and operate his business and even find ways to diversify his portfolio of how he manages his businesses. My grandparents were also entrepreneurs. My grandmother actually was a hairdresser. She ran her own beauty shop out of her house. They were farmers. They had to they managed their produce and all the things that they grew, and then they sold it at the farmers market. So just like watching them as well, My other grandparents were also entrepreneurs. So I think I just kind of have it in my blood that I just wanted to do my own thing. And, you know, after working in corporate America, like you said, for about 12 years, I decided it was time. I mean, it's a very different experience. Obviously, you go from like having a lot of support and in back office and all these things to really having to be, you know, a jack of all trades once you first get going. But it was a decision that I'm really glad I made, only because it's allowed me to learn so much on such deep levels. And so in 2008, I bit the bullet and decided to really launch Butterbeans and go full force. And the goal when I did that was to, you know, launch, run, operate, grow, and sell a company. So that was, you know, from day one, the goal. And it took about 9 years to achieve that goal. So it was something, it was as much a learning experience for me as anything.
Right. It's interesting, you know, a lot there that I'm observing, interesting to unpack. First, I'd say I found that most entrepreneurs I speak with, because my law practice, basically, my clients are mainly business owners and employers. I do some employee side as well, work for that matter. But I found that most entrepreneurs, most self-employed people, they tend to either come from a business or self-employed. You hear people say, my father, my grandfather, my grandmother, you know, were all involved in, my mother was an entrepreneur, or they come from a family where maybe it skipped a generation. I know in my family, I'm self-employed, I have my practice for 20 years now. And like, I know that for me, both my parents, you know, each worked. My father worked for the government for about 50 plus years. My mother worked for as a social worker at a school. But my father's mother, my grandmother, was one of the first female business owners in Coney Island, Brooklyn. Owned a candy stand on the beach and then a waffle shop back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So it's interesting. And then I just wanted to, an observation about your experience, how you bit the bullet and formed Butterbeans. And I hear you say that you had a goal in the beginning, right, Belinda, to like, I'm going to start this company and I'm going to position it for a sale. Is that what you find happens with a lot of your clients? Do they come to you sort of like, hey, the goal is to keep it forever or to sell, or do many businesses sort of not know their endpoint and kind of come to it at some point?
Everybody in the back of their mind wants to sell. They have no idea when. Some people know that they want to sell sooner than later. Some people aren't sure when. And there are a handful of people who maybe say, you know, I never want to sell. Like, I want this company to be in this manifestation forever, into perpetuity, because there's a purpose for this particular organization that needs to be just like this. So I would say those are fewer than the majority. And I think those are a little bit larger organizations, because sometimes there's more people involved at the ownership level. But for businesses where you have one or two owners, especially if they don't have children that are going to want to take over the company, they are interested in finding an exit. If there is somebody who feels like they have children who are interested in taking over the business, they're very happy to have that legacy live on and feel like they've, you know, trained their children and given them something to work for and to work with and to, you know, help them with their livelihoods for their families. But I would say that in the back of everybody's mind, they know that that is something that they need to face. I think that, you know, especially on hard days, it's more like, oh God, one day I'm going to sell this company and I'm not going to have these headaches anymore. But you have to remind people to be careful what you ask for, because if you do sell it, you have to think about what that scenario looks like too. And it's so you really want to plan for that if it is something that you're seriously considering.
Got it. Yeah, I hear you on that. I think planning is key, and I think knowing your vision, your goal. It's interesting that you said. Interesting that people want to sell, and it's the goal, but they don't always know when. And then you have, of course, the family run businesses where I see that too. People have you see their children take over, or even the children's children. It becomes like a family tradition. So good to know that. I was curious about that question, and we can circle back to how you help clients to make that happen.
Sure.
I did have another question for you, since we're addressing a lot of issues now for business owners in light of COVID-19. And I'm wondering, we're talking about the topic of abundance, right? And just my observation is that when you talk about abundance, like, we need to acknowledge, what the obstacles are that I think commonly derail businesses. And a lot of them don't make it past the first year or 2 years. So I guess the question is, for you, Belinda, what are some of the key obstacles that you see business owners face, which most commonly cause them not to make it?
Sure. I'll talk about three obstacles. There's more than three, but I'll just highlight three obstacles that I see. The first one I'll talk about is, if you have a situation where the leadership doesn't have clear goals. Another situation, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about each of these three, but just to kind of give you an idea of what I'll talk about. The second one I'll talk about is if you don't have the right skill set for what you're trying to achieve. And the third one that everybody always talks about is if you have a lack of capital. So in terms of the first one that I'll touch on, not having clear goals, this can really impede any size team, whether it's a small team of a couple of people or a large team of 100 people, because if you don't have goals that give you directionally where you're going with your business, then it's very easy to get sidetracked and to start working on things that aren't important, and for you to just start to go down rabbit holes or waste time or make the wrong decisions. Goals allow you to make a firm decision on whether or not you should spend time on this or that, because it enables you to go in the right direction. So sometimes that can be a major problem and a major obstacle if people start, getting in the weeds and they spread themselves too thin, and then they find themselves in a mess. Number two, not having the right skills deployed in certain areas. Sometimes when I first start working with clients, their books are not clean, and they cannot read. They don't know if they're making money, if they're losing money, because their books are a mess. So in that case, you need to make sure that you put the right accounting expertise in place so that you can manage your financials and know what's going on there. Operationally, if you're trying to scale your business and you've only got people that are working for you that have done small operations, and you don't have the skill set in place to build up the operations so that you can maybe implement an ERP system or something that is required for scaling, that could be a problem. Same with sales. If you don't have the right sales experience in your sales organization, you don't know how to create relationships, you don't know how to talk about the message, that could be a major obstacle from that standpoint. And if you want, I can save number three for whenever if you want.
Yeah, sure. This is really great stuff. And the third obstacle, the lack of capital, I think you mentioned, right?
Yes, lack of capital. I mean, this is something that, you have to be able to put your money where your mouth is, right? So if you are going to expect other people to invest in you, whether it's getting a bank loan, whether it's a friend and family loan, whether it's credit card debt, you have to be willing to also invest your own money into the operation. So how much do you believe in this idea of what you're doing? Are you willing to take your savings, your kids' college savings maybe, and invest it into a bunch of inventory or into an expertise in operations that you need to grow your business and scale it? Or how clear are you that what you're going to do is going to win? Because obviously you have to take risk, but you need to take a measured risk and an educated risk. And so making sure that you're willing to do that, and that you're building the right prototypes, you're getting the right proof of concepts, so that you're proving that what you're doing is actually worth the investment. That's whenever you're going to see the capital start to come. And you can also go into a business model that is not capital intensive. There's plenty of businesses out there, such as yours, where if you have the expertise and you have the ability to go get your clients, you will have revenue that will support the growth that you are doing. So that there's lots of ways to solve these obstacles, but I would say that those are three obstacles that can hinder a company's ability to thrive.
It's funny, I was thinking about the case of the, say, professional service provider, where the need for immediate capital, there's of course some capital needs to be required for running any business or practice or firm, but I think you touched on that last point. an interesting way. And a lot of companies might have the need for capital, let's say for a certain product, right, for a factory to make their product. And you had some great points there, Belinda. I'd love to circle back to how they interconnect with one another. We do have, it's perfect timing, our first commercial break we need to take. So I think it's a great breaking point. Folks, when we come back, I'm going to ask Belinda questions about just some of these obstacles, how to overcome them, and also some of the tools that she can help us with for abundance. So you're listening to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. My guest tonight, Belinda Di Giambattista. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, for the show, A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. battles mental illness? Hi, my name is Albert Daba. I'm the host of the show Extra Innings. Extra Innings, I discuss the topics of wellness, mental health, and the experience of surviving multiple suicides within my family. Listen live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern to Extra Innings for discussions with sports figures, artists, mental health professionals, and many others. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back, folks, to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. My guest tonight is Belinda Di Giambattista, who is the owner of Choose and founder, that is also of Choose Your Metric. And we're speaking tonight about basically your abundant business, a path back to success in the wake of COVID-19. And so, Belinda, your last answer to that question about some of these main obstacles had me thinking about just how much they're, I would imagine, somewhat interconnected, right? Like, for example, if you don't have maybe say clear goals to guide you along the way, you might not know what capital is needed and might not even know perhaps what skill sets are required by your workers. Do you see that sort of a cycle where these three factors feed into one another, or?
Yes, I mean, I think it's really hard, especially with small businesses, because there's usually a limited team, right? And with that comes limited expertise and experiences. And that's the crux of it, right? You need to be able to know what you don't know. And when you don't know what you don't know, it makes it a little more difficult, particularly when you're successful in what you've done so far and you're really confident that you're doing things, well. But I think what's very difficult is sometimes what got you to a certain level, whether it's the first 100,000, 250,000, 500,000, million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever got you to that milestone, will not get you to the next milestone. So if you're trying to get from 1 to 5, then you need to do something different that got you from 0 to 1. If you're trying to get from 10 to 20 or even 20 to 50, then you have to operate differently than what got you from 5 to 20. So that lack of experience, having it be in your bones. I mean, and this is true for everyone. This is true for me too, right?
Sure.
You have to be able to recognize when you need to pivot your business approach and start to integrate best practices that you haven't done before in order to help you get to that next level.
I think that's a very insightful point, because I think a lot of businesses think, okay, well, whatever I did for the first milestone of success, that first, say, $500,000 or that first 50 clients, they might think, okay, well, I'll just keep repeating that, doing that over and over again. Or they think, okay, if I want to grow to 3 times the size, I'll put in 3 times the work, or I'll just, expand my hours twice the hours. And I think what I hear you saying is, it's a qualitatively different approach, not just a matter of quantity, not just saying, okay, folks, we're going to business hours are now from, instead of 9 to 5, from 9 to 9. It's not, that might be a piece of this, but not necessarily. Okay, interesting. Yeah, to hear you say that. It kind of brings me to another question. Maybe it's a nice dovetail into the question of what we have this qualitatively different approach. So I'm wondering, Belinda, if you can share with our audience tonight, those that might want to grow and expand, what would you say some of the tools are, to get to that next level, break the stagnation, like tools for success that, let's say, you focus on when you're working with business owners who want to increase revenue, scale up, et cetera?
Right. And the approach is going to be maybe a little different for each client. They're in different industries. They have different, some are services, some are products. So you have to kind of take that into account whenever you're trying to come up with that plan, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
But the goal, regardless, is to understand what best practices are out there that you need to be implementing. And at that point, do a gap analysis within your own organization to understand where the gaps lie. And then, frankly, a lot of times people need to kind of get out of their own way in order to allow these things to go. Now, it's much easier said than done, because that requires trusting something you've never done before, trusting people that you may or may not trust, and spending money along the way in order to figure out what the gaps are and then try to, come up with the right plans in order to fill those gaps. Those gaps could mean anything from, implementing a training and development plan for an entire, for 50 people. That's not easy. But you need to do that in order to, upgrade and what I call professionalize a workforce that needs to take it up a level. It may be that you've been using, spreadsheets and a variety of manual processes and systems in order to carry out your systems. That may need to be an ERP system at this point and to be software. Perhaps you've outgrown QuickBooks, for example, and you need to take it to the next level. That is very hard when you've been doing something for so long and it's worked, to just turn that over and to go through a process that you're not familiar with is very, very difficult, but it's one that has to be done if you are going to make it to that, you're going to 5 times your sales. So best practices, project management, using sales pipelines, learning all kinds of different types of tools that, and templates that people can use that they haven't used before, and systematizing all of these things so that they are a part of the culture and the fabric of how they operate, instead of being random and good ideas and here and there, is a big part of what I try to help my clients come to realize and then implement and move forward with.
So there are a lot of concretes there, right? There are a lot of objective measures and criteria, and I hear you saying that the criteria might look different for different companies based upon their business model, based upon what industry they're in, who their clientele might be, and things of that nature. I can appreciate you're talking about just the idea that you don't know what you don't know, but you might have to trust a different process, and to that matter, trust different people to help you to implement those processes. I think very often, that what I hear you saying, and what I've seen with clients of mine, is that they either get very much sort of bogged down or lost in the weeds, putting out fires as a small business owner, and then they don't often look at the big picture, or they want to do everything themselves because in the beginning, when they were very cash poor and just starting out, they did everything themselves. They wore all the different hats, and I think that gets romanticized a little bit, right? Like the lawyer that in all the movies starts out in his or her own, and he or she hangs their shingle. They have a computer or a typewriter in the basement in the old days, and then they build up from there. And I think that that's the story of a lot of people. I know I had to start and wear many hats in the beginning, and then was able to. And I'll admit it was hard at times when as things progressed over the years to say, all right, I have to outsource this. I have to hire someone for that. I really don't have time to do my own books, and frankly, it's not my skill set. Lot is mainly in being an attorney, providing legal counsel, defense, representation, not doing the QuickBooks or the bookkeeping, which I've done in the beginning, but I find it torturous, So, so interesting to hear that you help your clients with these different areas. Is that right? You help them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think that's really good to have people who are aware of what you do and the specifics as well. I think it kind of gets me to looking ahead in this pandemic, because I think we've got the pandemic. I think it's impacted the approach that business owners take when it comes to sales and marketing. And actually, I want to ask you about that, but I'm seeing that we're about a minute away from a commercial break, and I don't want to leave a question just hanging in midair for you. I just kind of reiterate what I heard you say about that you look for the gaps, you look for places where people might be in need of a new way of doing things, and I think that's really important. As you mentioned. I think I should take our commercial break a minute early. That'll give you more time when we come back. So when we come back, folks, I'm going to ask Belinda to share with us ways that the pandemic may have impacted business owners' approach and how they can turn things around. How it's I really think about that there's hope on the horizon. So you're listening to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauer. My guest, Miss Belinda Di Giambattista of Choose Your Metrics. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Wise Content Creates Wealth. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Friday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2. They say content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Every episode features tools and tips for content marketing and business people telling the wise content stories of that success. Tune in every Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber, here today with my guest, Ms. Belinda Di Giambattista, founder and owner of Choose Your Metric. Belinda is a seasoned businesswoman and entrepreneur, and really helps her clients with all these issues that we're discussing tonight. And so, Belinda, again, it's great to have you on the show and talking about these issues with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So I wanted to ask you a question. I thought this might be a good segue into, our listeners tonight. They're business owners, they're employers, maybe they're employees as well. And some I think might be wondering what ways the COVID-19 pandemic, right, may have impacted like their approach in terms of how the business owners change their approach when it comes to sales, marketing, financial strategy. Can you talk a little bit about that topic, what you've seen?
Yes, I will say that, in my clients, I have seen everything from, businesses completely, do amazingly well during the pandemic. And I have clients whose businesses fell through the bottom during the pandemic. So it's very industry specific, as we all know. There were winners and losers in terms of that. So some of them have had to really pivot, right? So for those businesses that it fell through the bottom, any business that was heavily reliant upon travel, for example, was really hit hard. And I think that the lesson learned, and honestly, I feel like, when there's a crisis, you kind of really get the message, right? But these are rules that any business would want to live by, even not in a pandemic, right?
Yes.
But I think the big lesson there is make sure there's enough diversification, if possible, in what it is you're doing, so that you don't rely completely on one segment. I mean, it's very difficult, easier to say, in some cases, like if you're a hotel, then what are you going to do? But I think that to the extent possible to figure out how to have diversification in what you're doing. Some clients have added diversification. They've pivoted quite a bit in a case where, they were relying on travel and then they had to turn and figure out, well, how can I get business, from new clients that I've never met before, still need these types of services and stay in that, even when travel comes back, to maintain these different types of clients so that you're not so dependent on one particular type. So I think that's one lesson, that whenever companies are thinking about how to thrive, just look at your book of business and figure out, is there a way to continue to, disrupt yourself, I'll say, whether that be through targeting a different type of client. I don't want anybody to say, to take away from this, go, after a whole bunch of different new clients at the same time. Like, honestly, you should really perfect one thing, get it done really well, and then transfer that perfection onto a new type of market, whether that be, a market of buyers or a product market or, segment or whatever your new thing is. Perfect the one first and then figure out how to transfer that onto something else, apply it so that you can diversify your revenues in one way or another. So I hope that makes sense.
It does.
What I'm saying.
Sorry, yeah, it does. Yeah, I think, I think it's kind of interesting because I think when I hear about diversification, that point about first really get a solid foundation in your service you provide or the product, and then sort of replicate the success, knowing that there might be some different ways to achieve that in a different client base. And I wonder, I hear diversification, you mentioned, of perhaps of the services or the client that you serve. Would it be correct? I would imagine that what we've seen is also perhaps diversify the ways in which you might deliver whatever your service or product is, like restaurants, for example, right? They may still be in the Italian food or, a certain, or hey, we're an organic food restaurant, but it used to be you came in, it was a dining experience to be in our restaurant with the servers. And during COVID, suddenly places that like never did curbside pickup or didn't use apps for their, now suddenly, it's like you have to get into curbside pickup, apps, delivery. And so is that also part of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a tool out there called a business model canvas. If no one's ever heard of that, you can Google it. There's tons of examples of business model canvases. You can actually do it and click on images, and you'll see examples of other companies' business model canvases laid out. And what that allows you to do is for your specific business, it allows you to determine what are the different vehicles that we could be delivering our service. So for example, if you're e-commerce and say you have your website, should you also sell on Amazon? Should you also have your own app? Should you also sell, and what other vehicles and channels can you be selling your products through in order to make sure you're crossing the path of your client's journey no matter where they are? For example, if you are delivering a service like a restaurant, you already gave that example. If you are delivering services like mine, does it have to be in person or can it also be on Zoom? Do we have to be in the same city or can we be in different countries? So there's lots of different things to think about in terms of how you do this. But if you use a tool like that, that's a way to really try to analyze your own business and your own industry to drill down into how you can diversify in many different ways.
And it's called, you said, Belinda, I believe you said it's called the Business Model Canvas, and then you Google that and it would show you another good concrete tool to know about for people listening tonight. I think it's a really good point. I think that people may learn this during a crisis, but perhaps better to have this plan, better learn it now, right before the crisis hits, because when the crisis hits, then you have the stress of whatever that crisis is. And in this case, it was a global pandemic, which, once in a century type of situation. But certainly, if you and I were having this discussion, say, on the heels of, or shortly after, rather, tails of the big financial crisis of 2008, 2009, there are a lot of businesses, I think, that had to pivot, change services, change pricing models, change how they went out and got their clients. So I think it's a good point. I think that that you mentioned having clients perfect this and also diversify, but not necessarily waiting until the next crisis, so that we don't have to have clients call you up in 2025 when there's, the great, God knows what's happening, but the great financial or global or, world, whatever the case may be, not good. Hopefully there won't be anything that horrific or, traumatic as I think this pandemic has been for many people. But I think that's a really important point. I think it ties in nicely to your earlier points when we started the show about having adequate capital, right, invested, because you need capital to diversify, and having clear goals and knowing that the path to get to those goals might change along the way. You might think the path is I go here, here, and here, but then you see a roadblock and you have to, have the tools in place and the help, like your help, to go around those roadblocks. Maybe you take a different route. It's like recalibrating. So good to know that. I was wondering, it kind of segues or rather dovetails into a segue for my next question, which I kind of feel like you've been answering in a way by talking about the general issues, but like keeping it on your company, Choose Your Metric. Wondering, like, how do you distinguish yourself from other businesses when it comes to, like, say, coaching and consulting firms? Like, what unique philosophy or approach do you think will help businesses to thrive as we're going forward?
Yeah, my approach has really evolved over the past 5 years as I've been working with clients to really understand what the needs are. And if you can imagine a Venn diagram with these 3 circles, including like coaching and leadership, controller services like financial support, bookkeeping, and consulting services, that is really what I have created in order to help people. I started out with the coaching and leadership, only. And what I learned after doing that for small businesses I learned that a lot of times if the business was too small, I would say, less than 5 million.
Yes.
They didn't really have the resources to execute on all of the things we were coaching on. And that's when I realized I needed to start offering these other two services to go along with the coaching leadership. They need some done for you services. They need somebody to help them implement the strategies and implement the best practices that we talk about. Because left on their own, if they don't have the expertise and the experience, then it's very difficult for them to be able to go off and do that on their own. And so that's why I've kind of set it up this way. Some people need 1, 2, or, just some people need all 3. But it's really intended to meet the client where they are and to really understand, taking it back to goals, what are their goals, because if they do have a direction that they're going in, it makes it much easier to come up with a plan and for them to identify what kind of help they need. So those are the different services. My philosophy for any company that wants to thrive is to really give them the tools, the training, and whatever they need, the best practices in order to take them where they want to go.
Right. So it's kind of, I hear like a comprehensive approach, tools, training, and services, guidance, direction, but also the means to get there.
Right.
It's interesting to have that, and interesting to note also that what I hear you saying, clients might need, let's say, coaching and leadership, or they might need also the financial support, or they might need, let's say, the consulting services, or they might need 1 or 2 or 3.
Right.
Also, I couldn't help but think of the word diversification when you talked about how you started with one area of service, like coaching and leadership, and then changed or pivoted somewhat or replicated, right, in terms of expanding what your clients need. It's good to hear that, in terms of how you approach your clients. And also just to hear you say that, you can, I think it's important to note that, right, clients can have the knowledge and the information and the how-to, but if they don't have the tools in place to implement what they know, right, it's kind of like the knowledge itself alone doesn't really get them to where they need to be.
That is so key. Knowledge alone will not get you where you need to be.
Right.
If you do not have the expertise, the experience to actually implement the knowledge and the best practices, you will be in the same place.
Right.
And you have to trust the people that you hire as your advisors to get you there.
So self-reliance might be something that people, it's an important, let's say, trait, but if it's overly self-reliant and not trusting enough to have people hired to help with all the different aspects, it doesn't really work out well in terms of growth.
Yeah. You got to be all in. You got to really be all in. You really have to make up your mind and go for it.
Being all in. I think that's a great note to go to a commercial break on. So, which is right around this time. So folks, you're listening to Employment Law Today here on Talk Radio NYC. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law business law attorney. My guest tonight, Belinda Di Giambattista from Choose Your Metric. So stick around, and coming up, we'll talk about some of Belinda's most recent issues, the topics, things she's working on. So stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. My guest tonight, Belinda Di Giambattista, founder and owner of Choose Your Metric. And Belinda, again, it's great having you on the show today. I think you're giving our audience a lot of concrete, not only concepts and ideas, but also tools, like examples. We're talking about like the business model, the canvas rather, and everything else we're talking about so far. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about, without giving away any clients' information, of course, any interesting success stories like that you can share, maybe like, hey, I had a company, without giving names, it was at this stage, and here's how they got to the sales stage, or using the tools you described, maybe. Oh, I think you might be muted.
I'm still muted, yeah.
Sure.
I think what I can say is this. My clients who do particularly well, they understand the problem that their client is trying to solve in many cases better than the client understands it themselves. And so the key to this level of success, right, is to make an offer to your target client, your target customer, that they cannot refuse. So if you can figure out how to do that, no matter what your industry is, think about that from, employment law, right? So if you have a client, whether it be an employee or an employer, and they are in a situation that they've never dealt with before, and they know they want out, you've been through this so many times,
yes,
that you can explain to them what they want in a way that they're like, yes, I need that. And they cannot refuse your help, because they realize that the cost of them not taking your help is actually more than the cost of taking your help. And
so
where I see clients, hesitate to recognize that value, that's when they honestly end up spending more money to try to solve their problem, and it take longer in the long run than if they just are willing to step outside their comfort zone and realize that that what they're being told is actually good for them. And so if you can figure out how to, and I have clients who have figured that out. And so when you do figure that out, you give them that offer that they can't refuse in a variety of ways, right? So it can be, if it's a service, it's something, it's the way you articulate what you do. In that case, it can be through a very powerful mission, vision, and value statements that's going to ultimately lead to your brand message. So if you think of any of your favorite brands that are out there, and there's a great book called the brand, I'll have to get the name of the book. It's called The Brand Story, something like that. Telling your brand story, your story brand, maybe your story brand. This book takes you step by step through how to do that for yourself, because if you can really understand how to articulate that, then people are going to understand, this is what I want to buy. If it's an actual product, then it's through new product development. I was listening to the story of Parachute. Maybe you've heard of this brand. They sell bed sheets. That's how I think they started with either bed sheets or towels, but I think bed sheets. And they sold the same thing for 5 years. And so they were so dialed in to what their client wanted that they could produce new products and go outside of bed sheets and start adding towels and start adding robes and floor mats and other things because they were so dialed in. And so those things were super successful as soon as they started to do it because they knew what their client wanted. And I would say that my clients who have taken the time to understand what it is their clients want, what problem they're trying to solve so well that they are actually talking with the voice inside the person's head. When you can interrupt and you can start finishing the sentences of your client with the voice inside their head, you have gotten your messaging correct.
Wow. So it's the messaging also it could be a couple of things, right? It could be a service that the client needs and the client's pain of refusing your service, the consequences, the problems, or the lack of something good that might happen. That pain far outweighs the cost of your service, right? It'd be worse off without it. And of course, for products like selling the towels and the sheets, we know exactly what you want. We know maybe it's the comfort, maybe it's the style, maybe it's both. So we're going to give this luxury in different ways. I think that's really interesting. I think it kind of boils down to sort of, in my impression, is human nature, right? Which is, people want to, like the Buddhists talk about this a lot. I find that interesting, Buddhism, and practice it. It's, we tend to, we tend to grasp at the things we want and we tend to push away things we don't want. And Buddhism talks about, not doing that, being centered and whatnot. But I think if you're a business owner, you know that your clients, right, they're coming to you or your customers because either they want something, they want to achieve something, obtain something that gives them comfort or security or joy or pleasure, or they have a pain, a problem that you can solve. So it's interesting you mentioned employment law, and I appreciate that because I think that, as an employment lawyer, it's an interesting line you walk, right? You want to make sure, I want to make sure I'm ethical, of course, and listening and not being pushy, but also getting across to my potential clients that say the issue they have, like the Department of Labor audit notice that says, you have 5 complaints against you, we're going to have a hearing on this issue, or that complaint in federal court that says, these 10 plaintiffs have sued you and it's a class action they're looking to get, underway, and that not having help, trying to go it alone can lead to disastrous results.
That's right.
And it's not even a scare tactic, it's the reality. It's sort of like, this is like when you go to your doctor, they're not trying to scare you. They give you some sobering news, like, hey, I need this procedure, they're there to help you and they can alleviate, your suffering. So I appreciate that, it's also just hearing you talk about the clients that can recognize that. I suppose they might need to hire people to help them to understand their clients. They might, like, research and development, right?
Some people need help understanding their clients, and then some people they do that really well. And they sell a bunch of stuff and then they need help fulfilling, right? So,
yes.
Some people need help on the sales part, some people need help on the operations part, the infrastructure piece. So it again goes back to when you have a small team, you have a limited degree of expertise. And so you need to fill the gaps and figure out what those are.
Interesting. Well, I think all, good stuff for us to take away from this conversation tonight. We've got about 3 minutes left. I usually like to give my guests 2 minutes to sort of a 2-minute segment, like to share whatever you'd like, your website, how do people contact you and choose a metric, any events you have coming up. The floor is yours.
Okay, sure. Let me see if I do this properly.
Sure. I think you have screen sharing, but
yes. Okay, I got it.
Sure.
Okay, so in case anybody wants to, find me or check me out, you can visit my website, chooseyourmetric.com. I'm just clicked over to the resources page just to show people that there's a lot of free stuff that you can actually download from my website if you want to, try some stuff on your own, whether it's, building out a sales pipeline, trying to figure out a roadmap for your business. If you're trying to manage your cash flow and you need to model out some assumptions questions, you can do that here. If you're working on your pitch and getting into understanding your client's journey and trying to figure out what is that message, what is my mission, what is my vision, you can check out that spreadsheet. And then if you want to figure out how to just test your idea, here's a test your idea template. All this stuff is free. Feel free to download it. And if you want to chat with me, you can click schedule consult right here on the website. And I'd be happy to help you brainstorm and answer any questions that you have about your business. You can learn about my services on the website. We do everything from, leadership, 360-degree reviews, self-assessments, helping people identify what their leadership gaps are, to operational gaps, financial gaps, all kinds of things we do there, management consulting, the controller services, we already talked about all that stuff. So this gives you a little bit of a hint to what we're doing. And if you happen to have somebody in your life that you feel like could use some group coaching, some one-on-one, you can check out our business coach gift for your favorite entrepreneur. That's a group coaching thing to help them formulate their idea. If they've been using you as a sounding board and it's above your pay grade and you want them to talk to somebody like me, that might be a nice gift. So that's a little bit about my website and where you can get in touch with me.
Excellent. And Belinda, I'll just tell those listening on the audio file or on the radio that your website is Choose Your Metric, CHOOSE, right? YOUR, metric, M as in Michael, ETRIC. Belinda, I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight. We have to wrap up in about 30 seconds, but I will say that it's great having you on the show. If people found this interesting, you reach out to Belinda. And for more weekly talks with guests about issues impacting businesses, tune in Tuesday nights, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to Talk Radio NYC, live on Facebook or on the site. Once again, Belinda, a pleasure having you on the show tonight. Great topic, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been my pleasure.
Excellent. Have a great night, and tune in next week to Employment Law Today. I'm Eric Sauber, employment law attorney at the law firm M. Sauber. Thank you.
You're listening to Talk Radio